It's good to have all of you here today. Welcome for those of you who are here in person and to those of us joining online through our live streaming. It's good to have you as a part of the discussion. As we've said in describing this event, too oftentimes we end up shouting at each other and not actually talking with each other, particularly on issues that can be divisive and issues that are quite complex. So what we have tried to do is to create an atmosphere where issues can be presented, discussed, and to allow people to make up their own minds after hearing the presentations. In a minute here, Dr. Kelly will give his greetings, then I will describe our guests. We'll let them each speak for 20 minutes, and I have an assistant here up front who will get to be my hands and my feet. He will hold up signs for the speakers to see how much time they have left, and when they're done, when all of the speakers are done, we'll take a break. We will come back and we will have them each address each other for 5 minutes, or maybe the break comes after the 5 minutes. Then we will have a Q&A time where you get to ask your questions of the guests. I'll describe that in more detail later on. So again, welcome. This is hosted by the Institute for Faith, Institute for Faith and the Public Square. This is made possible by the generous contribution of the foundation which wishes to remain anonymous. We're also doing this in partnership with 3 other institutions here. Michael Hulsdorf with the University of New Orleans, Dr. John Penny at the Southern University of New Orleans, and Dr. David Delio with the University of Holy Cross. And so we welcome our partners to be with us. We will be continuing our discussions after this by having book discussions at each of the locations of the other schools. And so we're excited to see what's going to come about through the continuing discussions after this event is over. Now I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Chuck Kelly, who is in his 21st year, 22nd year, 23rd. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? So Dr. Kelly?
Thank you and welcome to the campus of New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. We are delighted to have you here this evening. If you are a student or faculty member of the seminary or a visitor and guest, we're delighted to have you here. New Orleans Seminary is a seminary of the Southern Baptist Convention. We have some very strong convictions about God as the creator of the world and all of us, about all of our needs to have a redemptive act of grace in our hearts through Jesus Christ, about the necessity for us to love and nurture and care for one another, and many other things. But one thing we have learned through the years, and it's a value we hold very highly, that as strong as our convictions are, does not mean we do not engage, talk, and discuss with people who may have a completely different set of convictions. We do conversations. That's who we are as New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. As Dr. Harsh said, we intentionally seek out some issues where there is not much conversation or as much as we think needs to happen in order to see if we can not only have a conversation here, but perhaps model how to do a conversation with differing opinions for people to take elsewhere for other conversations in other places. So we are delighted to have this opportunity to discuss the very complicated, very significant issue of immigration, one of the most critical and complicated and controversial issues that our nation is facing at this time from a world of different perspectives. We do this also as Baptists. Baptists have long believed in the freedom of the conscience before God. We have contributed, I suppose, the biggest Baptist contribution to the world at large is the separation of church and state and the sole competency before God. We do not ask for the state to give us a protected marketplace. We just ask for the state to give an open marketplace for all people to stand for their convictions without penalty, without persecution. And in that sense of having that open, free marketplace for our faith so that we might tell others and for others who have faith and convictions that they might want to share as well. We as Baptists have no trouble sponsoring an event like this because we think in our conversational work together, perhaps we can eventually come to some helpful and some useful conclusions, not only for ourselves individually, for our neighbors, and for our whole nation. So we welcome you to an important conversation and pray that you will enjoy every aspect of it and that you will take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions and express comments to this wonderful panel that Dr. Harsh has put together. I'm going to lead us in a word of prayer, as is our custom in this place, and then we'll turn the program over to Dr. Harsh. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you so very much for what is ours in Christ. I thank you for the transforming effect of his life on me. I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of an institution like this and to be in a city like this. A city that is so vast and complicated, composed of so many different ethnic and cultural groups, composed of such a rich heritage and past going back through all of its 300 years of existence. And Father, we simply ask your blessing upon this conversation tonight. Let it be illuminating for all of us. May we find a path to deal with some of the most important aspects of this important conversation. We thank you so very much for your promise that one day you will make all things right. We long for that day. In the precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen and amen.
I'd like to introduce our guests. First, on my far right, your left, is Ben Johnson, and since 2009, he has been with the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce, and he is a founding member of the Regional Business Loan Corporation. There's a lot of edicts, MES, BIC, and has served on the regional board of the Chamber of Commerce, and has received his Master of Business Administration from Tulane, one of our local universities. Elaine Kimbrell graduated from George Washington University, get the right George, sorry about that, in 2000, where she earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in International Affairs. She earned her JD from Loyola University, so we have two Green Wave fans over here to my right, and she received that, and then, I'm sorry, I said Tulane, didn't I? I need to read I said Loyola and then said it was Tulane. I apologize for that. I'm trying to be fast and I'm being inefficient. So let me start over. You got your JD from Loyola, which is next door to Tulane here in New Orleans, and that was in the year of 2005. She's been a member of the Maritime Law Journal and has participated as a volunteer income tax assistance program. She had previously worked as a representative with U.S. Senator Mary Landrieu in the Constituent Services. She is now a managing partner at Ware Immigration and past chair of the AILA Mid-South chapter. To my left and to your right is a returning speaker, Noel Castellanos. And Noel has been in full-time ministry in Latino and urban communities since 1982. He's worked with youth ministries and church planting and advocacy in San Francisco and San Jose and Chicago. He serves as the board member of the Christian Community Development Association, of which there's a chapter here in New Orleans. He's also serving on President Obama's Council for Faith and Neighborhood Partnerships. No, well, you always retain the title even after you've been out of the office. It's still President Jimmy Carter, and it's been a long time since he has been there. So we give honor to those to whom honor is due. And has written several books. One is Where the Cross Meets the Street, What Happens to the Neighborhood When God is at the Center, and co-author of A Heart for the Community, New Models for Urban and Suburban Ministry. And then on my far left, your far right, is Reverend Tony Suarez. And Tony is the Executive Vice President of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference, which is the country's largest Hispanic Christian organization with more than 40,000 congregations. He works in the D.C. office, lives in Virginia, and how long have you been working with HELC? 7 years. And so he's there. He's got 3 children, and so it's exciting to hear about what's going on in his life with the younger children at home. He's lived with and worked with the evangelical community. He has served with, thank you, Dr. Kelly, with the Faith Alive television program as part of TBN, and is currently on the Faith Advisory Board for the White House with President Trump. So we'll have viewpoints from a variety of perspectives. His new book, The Church Triumphant, is due out just in a couple of weeks here. Pre-sale now, probably at Amazon or any particular place. Amazon. All right. Well, so we're going to get a chance to get started here. You don't need to hear me talking as much as you'd like to hear them talking. I would like to reiterate some of our partners that we have had with UNO. Dr. Michael Hulsdorf contacted me while we were at supper saying that he has a sick child, and so he is not able to be here. Dr. Penny was uncertain whether he was able to be free. I don't see you. Dr. Penny, are you here? I do not see him. Dr. Delio, if you'll stand up and wave, as from the University of Holy Cross. And so what you're seeing here is a gathering of people from across our city, from different ethnic backgrounds and different religious backgrounds, to gather and discuss the issue of immigration. This is a personal issue for me. I am a first-generation immigrant. My father immigrated here, got his green card, and then became a citizen. My wife is an American citizen, but born in another country. On my mother's side, we got here a little earlier than my dad's side. They came as early as the 1640s and indirectly through the Mayflower. On our youngest son, he was born overseas, and we adopted him, and he became a U.S. citizen as part of the adoption. So immigration has been part of our family. We've been immigrants, we are immigrants. So it'd be interesting to hear our speakers talk about what it's like to be an immigrant, what's the process of becoming one legally and how we get here, and what's our responsibility as Christians in dealing with the immigrant community. So without further ado, we will begin with Ben Johnson talking about, from the chamber. I'll let you decide how you're going to direct your comments.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Dr. Harsh, thank you for the invitation, and I'm honored to be on the panel with you all. I have prepared remarks. I think there's just compelling business reasons to get this immigration thing straight. So Dr. Harsh invited me to be on the panel to provide a business perspective on immigration and to discuss the impact that immigration has on employers in the United States. I have drawn my information from data from conservative and progressive organizations, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, the U.S. Department of Labor, Department of Homeland Security, the George W. Bush Institute, New American Economy, American Immigration Council, National Skills Coalition, and the Huffington Post. And it's amazing how all the information aligned. On a professional and personal level, I have two reasons for caring about immigration. Professionally, every business that I talk to in New Orleans, small, mid-size, or large, workforce is their number one issue. They cannot find the skilled workforce they need to operate their business. On a personal level, both my wife and I, our grandparents were all four of them on each side were immigrants. So as grandchildren of them, we appreciate the fact that they were able to come to America seeking a better life and economic opportunities. I find that the issue of immigration in the United States is a political argument that is complicated and is undermining traditional American values and the American economy. I have focused my comments this evening around myths and facts of immigration and why business and employers need immigration. One of the most compelling summaries of the impact of immigration are found in multiple myths and facts reports, and I have emerged during this current immigration reform debate. Key issues are the relationships of immigrants to jobs, wages, taxes, entrepreneurship, population, crime, integration, welfare, and border security. The consistent statement that repeatedly appears in any of the reports, research, and articles on immigration is immigrants significantly benefit the U.S. economy by creating new jobs and complementing the skills of the U.S. native-born workforce with a net positive impact on wage rates overall. That's a powerful statement. So first myth, jobs filled by immigrants are jobs that could be filled by unemployed Americans. The fact, immigrants typically do not compete for jobs with native-born workers and immigrants create jobs as entrepreneurs, consumers, and taxpayers. Observation: one of the principal ways in which immigrants create jobs is through businesses they establish. Immigrants to our country join native-born Americans in being risk takers. According to the Kauffman Index of Entrepreneurial Activity, in 2014, immigrants continued to be almost twice as likely as the native-born to become entrepreneurs. Second observation: immigrants do not steal jobs from American workers. Immigrants come to the United States to fill jobs that are available, often not desirable to native-born workers, or to establish their own businesses. Research has found that there is no correlation between immigration and high unemployment at the regional, state, county, or parish level. Nor is there any correlation between immigration and high unemployment among minorities. Immigrants go where the jobs are, or they create jobs of their own. Consistent, documented data. There are many examples, nationally and regionally, of immigrants moving to where the jobs are. During and after World War II, Mexican immigrants were instrumental in alleviating shortages arising after the war effort. During the oil boom of the late 70s and early 80s, there were record migrations to Texas. In the 1900s, it was the fast-growing South and Mountain West states that received immigrants, many for the first time. Myth: immigrants drive down the wages of American workers. Fact: immigrants give a slight boost to the average wages of Americans by increasing their productivity and stimulating business investment. Observation: local level studies have demonstrated the positive impact of immigration on wages. Wage studies of two communities that experienced a large influx of immigrants over a short period of time. This was done by the Institute for the Study of Labor in Bonn, Germany. And what they studied was both Dawson County, Nebraska, and Miami, Florida. They found that wages increased, even for lesser skilled workers who were most likely to be in competition for jobs with new immigrants. Likewise, a study of more than 100 cities by economist David Card with the Center for Research and Analysis of Migration in London, England, found that wages of native-born Americans tend to be higher in cities with larger immigrant populations. Myth: U.S. economy doesn't need more immigrant workers. Fact: immigrants will replenish the U.S. labor force as millions of baby boomers retire. Observation: the U.S. economy is facing a demographic crisis. Roughly 76 million baby boomers, nearly 1/4 of the U.S. population, are now starting to reach retirement age. This wave of aging over the next 2 decades will have a profound economic impact. Social Security and Medicare are projected to experience severe shortfalls. 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 each day. As a smaller number of workers and taxpayers will support a growing number of retirees, immigrants will play a critical role in replenishing the workforce and therefore the tax base. Immigrant workers will do more than replace retiring native retirees themselves. The United States Bureau of Labor Statistics expects that the aging of U.S. population will generate a high demand for healthcare workers of all kinds, both skilled and lesser skilled. Between 2014 and 2024, employment is projected to increase by 23% in healthcare occupations. Immigrants will likely be employed in healthcare services to meet this growing demand. And finally, on that myth, immigrants feed the labor market by flowing into industries and areas where there is a need for workers, where bottlenecks or shortages might otherwise prevent economic growth. Myth: during the periods of high unemployment, the U.S. economy does not need temporary foreign workers. Fact: temporary workers from abroad fill specialized needs in specific sectors of the U.S. economy. Even when the unemployment rate was relatively high, the demand for specific kinds of workers in particular sectors of the economy remain high as well. For instance, farm workers, nurses, high-skilled manufacturing workers, high-skilled technological workers continue to be in short supply. Unemployment for Americans in some of these areas remains remarkably low. Myth: there is no shortage of native-born Americans for open positions in the natural sciences, engineering, computer science, and thus no need for foreign-born high-tech workers. Fact: job openings are expanding at educational levels where demographic data show too few native-born students. These shortfalls will persist in the future. Moreover, relative to other economic indicators, wages are increasing in STEM jobs requiring higher education. Observation: job growth in positions requiring graduate-level STEM training is exploding, far outpacing the American STEM training pipeline. Currently, the number of American students pursuing STEM fields is growing at less than 1% a year. And today there are more than 230,000 advanced degree STEM jobs that will not even be filled. And these jobs would not be filled if everybody in the United States, native-born, graduates and found a job. The future is IT and technology. Another fact to consider is the data shows that wages are increasing in STEM jobs requiring higher education, with wage increases being a commonly accepted indicator that the number of qualified Americans is insufficient to fill the number of jobs being created. In addition, the high rise in high-skilled immigrants, a pronounced trend since the 1990s, has been linked to innovation, specifically to higher patenting rates among immigrants. Interestingly, greater innovation in STEM-related businesses among immigrants appears to boost it among native-born Americans as well. Immigrants innovate more than natives because they concentrate in STEM occupations where both R&D and entrepreneurial activity are rapidly expanding. 44% of medical scientists are foreign-born, as are 42% of computer software developers. Immigrant workers are also overrepresented among college professors, engineers, mathematicians, nurses, doctors, dentists, to name a few. Myth: immigrants hurt communities that are struggling economically. Fact: immigrants have economically revitalized many communities throughout the country. In Michigan, for example, while only 6% of the state's population is foreign-born, immigrants founded about 1/3 of the high-tech companies in the state over the past decade. The state, through its Welcoming Michigan campaign of building immigrant-friendly community, clearly sees the need to attract immigrants to the area. Detroit also recognizes this need. The city released the Global Detroit Report, which documents a startup rate for immigrant-funded high-tech firms in Michigan that is 6 times the rate for the native-born population. Myth: undocumented immigrants do not pay taxes. Fact: undocumented immigrants pay billions of dollars a year in taxes. Each year, Social Security taxes are withheld from billions of dollars in wages earned by workers whose names and Social Security numbers do not match the records of the Social Security Administration. According to the SSA, undocumented immigrants paid $13 billion in payroll taxes into the Social Security Trust Fund in 2010. Tax payments by undocumented immigrants and their families are also sizable at the state and local levels. The Institute for Taxation and Economic Policy estimates that households headed by undocumented immigrants paid $11.6 billion in the state and local taxes in 2013. That included just under $1.1 billion in personal income taxes, $3.6 billion in property taxes, and more than $6.9 billion in sales and excise tax. Myth: immigrants come to the United States for welfare benefits. Fact: undocumented immigrants are not eligible for federal public benefit programs, and even legal immigrants face stringent eligibility restrictions. Observation: undocumented immigrants are not eligible for federal public benefits such as Social Security, Supplemental Security Income, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, Medicaid, Medicare, and food stamps. Even most legal immigrants cannot receive these benefits until they have been in the United States for 5 years or longer. And regardless of how long they've been here, they often do not receive any benefits. Myth: today's immigrants are not assimilating into the United States. Fact: today's immigrants are buying homes, becoming U.S. citizens, and learning English. Throughout U.S. history, each new wave of immigrants have been accused of not assimilating into the U.S. society. The Italian, Polish, and Eastern European immigrants who came here at the end of the 19th century faced this accusation and subsequently proved it wrong as they and their children learned English, bought homes, got better jobs, became U.S. citizens, and integrated into their communities in many other ways. The Latin American and Asian immigrants who have come here more recently now face the same accusations. As with their predecessors, they are proving that accusation to be false and are integrating into the U.S. society and climbing the social economic ladder over time. The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine released a groundbreaking report in 2015, which found that as immigrants and their descendants become integrated into the U.S. society, many aspects of their lives improved, including educational attainment, occupational distribution, income, and language ability. In terms of education, despite large differences in starting points among immigrants, their children, the second generation, meet or exceed the schooling level of other native-born Americans. More than 1/4 of foreign-born have a college education or more, and with few exceptions, their children do exceptionally well in school. As for earnings, not only do immigrant workers themselves make dramatic progress the longer they live in the United States, their children do even better. The children of Mexican and Central American immigrants in particular make a large leap, with 22% of the second-generation Mexican men and 31% of second-generation Central American men working in professional or managerial positions. Second-generation women make even greater progress. Myth: immigrants are more likely to commit crimes than native-born Americans. Fact: immigration does not cause crime rates to rise, and immigrants are actually less likely to commit crimes or be behind bars than native-born Americans. Immigrants are much less likely to be behind bars than native-born Americans. A study by the American Immigration Council found that among young men, incarceration rates are lowest for immigrants. This holds true regardless of ethnicity or educational attainment, even for Mexicans, Salvadorans, and Guatemalans who comprise a majority of the undocumented population. Myth: reforming the legal immigration system will not help secure the border. Immigration reform is an integral part of any effective border security strategy. Since 1986, after passage of the Immigration Reform and Control Act, the federal government has spent nearly $200 billion on immigration enforcement. Yet during that time, the unauthorized population has tripled in size to roughly 11.2 million. The growth of the undocumented population did not occur because 200 billion was not enough to secure the border. Rather, this money was spent trying to enforce immigration laws that have consistently failed to match either the U.S. economy's demand for workers or the natural desire of immigrants to be reunited with their families. Therefore, enforcement, coupled with common sense reforms to our legal immigration system, is one of the most effective ways to enhance national security. Effective immigration reform would enhance border security in multiple ways. For example, creating flexible employment-based visa programs that respond to the needs of labor markets will improve the legal avenues for entry into the U.S., which would reduce the flow of undocumented immigrants in the future. Workers admitted under these types of visa programs would be screened against law enforcement databases prior to entering the country. Paired with a workable employment verification system, these new temporary workers would be unable to work in the United States once the visa expired. That's kind of controversial, but it's a way of starting a process. These documented facts and myths are very compelling examples of why the businesses and employers support immigration and immigration reform that will support a strong American economy. With America's retiring baby boomers, immigration dramatically addresses America's workforce crisis of extreme proportions. From a business and employer perspective, immigration is a net positive. In closing, I would recommend that the next steps for immigration policymakers consider data. Use the existing government and business data as a source of analysis and monitoring the impact of immigration on the workforce and the economy. Reform. Structure immigration reform to take advantage of immigration's many benefits. And finally, speak up. If the American economy is to survive and prosper, the business community's leadership will be required to become more proactive in directing this conversation, credentialing its facts and data, and lead with bipartisan leadership to create credibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to kind of take us a little bit back and go through some of the pathways to come to the U.S., both on the temporary non-immigrant side and then on the permanent side, to give you an idea of what this looks like from a legal perspective. Before we get into all of the specifics and some examples, I want to give you a framework of who we're talking about when we talk about foreign nationals. Of course, we know that citizens are people who have basically full access to the American system. These are people who can vote, who can run for public office, who cannot be deported from the United States. These comprise people who are born in the United States, born abroad to a U.S. citizen parent, or who have become naturalized citizens after a period of permanent residency. And then you take a step sort of down the ladder to immigrants or permanent residents. Those are people who are also known as green card holders. Green card holders come to live and work in the United States permanently. Although they are here permanently, allegedly permanent residents, they can lose that residence if they commit certain crimes, if they depart the U.S. for extended periods of time. Of course, they cannot vote, they cannot run for public office. They have more limited rights in terms of our American system. Then you talk about non-immigrants. These are people who are here temporarily. They come here for a limited purpose to engage in a specific activity for a particular period of time. This can be anything from a tourist who comes here, to go to Disneyland, to a foreign student who comes to attend a university, to somebody who's won a Nobel Prize. And we'll talk a little bit more about non-immigrants in a minute and some of the limitations that there are in the current system for non-immigrants. Then we have other people that live in the United States. They are here with government permission, but they don't fall into any of these other categories. These are people who have something called temporary protected status. That is a government designation that is usually given after, mostly after a natural disaster. Most recently, we saw TPS designations for Haiti and Nepal. But these designations are being rolled back under the TPS program. Every 18 months or so, the federal government redesignates the program and extends the period of time that these individuals can stay. In this category is also the people that fall under the DACA program, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. These people are also called Dreamers. Those are children who came to the U.S. People who came to the U.S. as children, usually have completed at least high school or enrolled in a GED program, and do not have a criminal record. And then also asylees, so people who are here after having proven that they have a fear of return to their home country for a particular reason. Then we talk about undocumented individuals, and these are people who either entered the U.S. without inspection, or they came illegally without permission, without a visa, or who came by fraud, or people who came here legally but have since overstayed their status. And so with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit more about non-immigrants. So again, these are people who come here temporarily. And the non-immigrant classifications in the U.S. are, there's usually a letter and a number that goes with it. So a visitor, for example, is a B2. Under our system, there is a limited list of individuals who can come into the United States in a particular classification, and again, it's for a particular purpose. The system that we have in place now, kind of drawing on what Ben's saying in terms of employment and addressing the U.S. economy and the U.S. workforce, is that the system is very limited. When you talk about positions that are, where they're skilled, but they don't necessarily rise to the bachelor level, or somebody who would qualify for an outstanding, as an outstanding individual in the sciences or arts, you have really more limited options. So you hear all the time about farmers in California that can't pick their strawberries because they can't get enough workers. For those types of classifications, there are a limited number of visas available, and the system is very inflexible, and it doesn't reflect what American businesses need to meet the demands for their particular industry. Also, when you look at things like welding or other jobs that are skilled positions that might require some type of technical training, there is no classification for that. So there is not a way for an employer to sponsor somebody for those positions. And then looking down sort of the ladder, at more lower skilled jobs, there are also quotas, or an unavailability of a classification for these individuals. When you move into the sort of the more higher skilled positions, you talk about positions that require at least a bachelor's degree in a specific field of study. So we're talking about accountants, engineers, computer-related occupations. Those individuals would typically apply for something called an H-1B. And with the H-1B, it is for private employers subject to a quota. There are currently 85,000 of these visas available every year for the entire United States. And the demand for the visas, last year it went down for the first time, but they received 199,000 applications for 85,000 slots. So it creates this burden on an employer. They've found an individual that they want to sponsor. They'd like to have the individual work for them, but if they are not lucky enough to get one of these 85,000 visas, then they're basically out of luck. And in a lot of instances, they may prefer to hire a U.S. worker. Obviously they have to sponsor the person, and it takes, time, money, and effort. But there is no U.S. worker that is available for their particular position. And then we talk about permanent residence. We are there are basically, 6 ways to become a permanent resident in the United States. We will see that for some individuals, this process will take a very long time. You can become a permanent resident through family. So if you're the spouse of a U.S. citizen, the child of a U.S. citizen, the married son or daughter of a U.S. citizen, the spouse of a permanent resident, the unmarried adult child of a permanent resident, the parent of a U.S. citizen, or the sibling of a U.S. citizen, you may be eligible to apply for permanent residency in the U.S. But unless you are the parent of a U.S. citizen, the minor child of a U.S. citizen, or the spouse of a U.S. citizen, you will wait many, many years, in some instances, before you can immigrate to the United States. For instance, if you are from Mexico and you are sponsoring your adult unmarried child, right now, there are visas available for people who filed on or before May 15th of 1997. Yes, you heard that right. There are only 140,000 of these visas available every year. They get divided among different categories and then out into country allocations depending on levels of immigration. So you can see how it has created this giant backlog in some instances. For individuals who desperately want to be reunited with their family but cannot. And then you move to the employment-based side. Employers are able to sponsor their employees for permanent residence. In general, they do have to advertise for the jobs. They're required to pay the individual a certain wage that's set for them by the Department of Labor based on the qualifications that they've laid out in the application. And there are also backlogs in these categories. So for instance, when you talk about an individual who is working in a master's level position, who is from India, right now there are visas available for individuals who filed on or before March 26th of 2009. So these individuals will probably wait about 10 years before they get a green card. And then you move down to other individuals, so people who have qualified for asylum are eligible for permanent residency after they've been in the U.S. for a year in that status. One of the programs that has been mentioned a lot for elimination is something called the Diversity Visa Lottery. This is a way for the U.S. to attract immigrants from countries that have historically low levels of immigration to the United States. So they do run a lottery every year to allow people to come into the U.S. You can also apply for something called an investor green card. Typically would require a $1 million investment in the U.S. and employment of 10 U.S. citizen or permanent resident workers. You're also eligible to apply for permanent residency if you are detained and put into removal proceedings. If you've been in the United States for at least 10 years and you can show exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to a U.S. citizen child, a spouse, or a parent, then you may be granted permanent residence by an immigration judge in removal proceedings. The important thing to keep in mind about either applying to be a non-immigrant or obtaining permanent residence in the United States is that if you do not have status in the U.S., in general, you are not eligible to become a permanent resident in the United States. So as a U.S. citizen, if I sponsored my husband, if he entered the United States illegally, he would not be eligible to apply for residence in the United States under the law as it is today. That means that he would have to depart the U.S., apply for an immigrant visa overseas, and return after demonstrating that I would suffer extreme hardship if he was not allowed to return to the U.S. So you can see, for many families, extended separations is not something that they can really, afford to do on many levels, which unfortunately is sometimes the case when you talk about, getting legal. If you have somebody who came here as a non-immigrant and overstayed their visa, typically speaking, they are not allowed to just apply for a new benefit. Once an individual has been here for over 180 days without permission, if they depart the U.S., they are subject to a bar for coming back. The other thing to keep in mind is that as people go through the process of being sponsored, either coming as a non-immigrant or coming as a permanent resident, they do go through background checks. There are typically 4 checks that each individual will go through. They get fingerprinted and photographed, and then they do name checks and other background checks in terms of screening individuals before they enter the United States. I just wanted to touch a little bit about, on some of the things that we're seeing in terms of policy changes. The last time that there was any kind of comprehensive immigration reform was in 2000. There have been several other attempts to kind of move this ball forward. However, they have all failed. The main, kind of balancing that you have to do is dealing with the population that is here and undocumented, that has U.S. citizen children, that's contributing to the economy. They have, homes in the United States, versus the people who I mentioned, who have been waiting for decades sometimes to come to the United States legally. So you can see that there's these two sets of individuals with, a lot of stake here. And balancing those two pieces is very, very difficult. What we're seeing now in terms of the current administration and their approach to immigration is a big discussion on the types of workers that we're bringing to the United States through the Buy American, Hire American program. That was an executive order signed in April of 2017 that's talking about creating higher wages and employment rates for U.S. workers to protect the U.S. Economic interest. And the main way that we're seeing this is an attack on the H-1B visa that I mentioned. A lot more requests for evidence. Requests for evidence are up to 77% from about 16%. So there's a lot of scrutiny on the types of workers that American entities are bringing in. And again, we're only talking about 85,000 visas every year that are allocated under this category. We're also seeing a lot of scrutiny on IT-related positions and companies and positions where the entry-level wage is being used. For temporary H-1B workers and for H-2B, which are seasonal workers and agricultural workers, there is a minimum wage requirement. But despite the fact that there have been no regulatory changes, the administration does not like the use of an entry-level wage in terms of the H-1Bs. And they've also, processing times have extended significantly, and there is no prior deference to adjudication. So just because you held a classification in the past and you're applying for an extension, that does not mean that you will be approved in the future. We have also heard in terms of prospective policies, that they would like to move to more of a merit-based immigration system. So in that system, points would be given for more highly educated people, for individuals who are working in specific types of jobs, for more highly paid jobs, and things of that nature. I also just wanted to briefly mention the sensitive location policy. I think we'll be discussing this a little bit more. But the sensitive location policy is a policy that was announced in October of 2011 to cover enforcement actions, including arrests, interviews, searches, and surveillance for purposes of immigration enforcement only. And this sensitive location policy basically was meant to ensure that enforcement actions do not take place at sensitive locations like churches, hospitals, or schools, unless there is some type of exigent circumstances or law enforcement action that would lead the individual to a sensitive location, or a specific prior approval. And essentially, of course, this is meant to allow people to drop their children off at school, to seek medical attention, to attend weddings and funerals without a fear of deportation. It also covers protests and things of that nature. We have seen locally and across the country that there are some churches that have essentially offered sanctuary to some individuals who fear arrest and deportation. We have also seen Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, who within the last 6 months or so, arrest people who are bringing children to hospitals, for instance. It's important to also mention that this sensitive location policy does not apply to entities directly, kind of close to the border. And so, we have seen additional enforcement action by ICE, in those locations as well. So this policy is still in place. And the other thing to kind of look for that we think will be changing has to do with family detention. We all saw over the last few months where children had been separated from their parents. Under the quote-unquote old system, they had family detention, which meant that families were detained together. And then the federal courts indicated that they could not hold children for more than 24 days. And so that they ended family detention, and now we're looking at the possibility of family detention returning.
Thank you all for the opportunity to be here tonight. And the genesis of my journey with immigration reform, I'm the son of a Colombian immigrant to the United States. And my father pastored a Spanish-speaking congregation in the suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. And I grew up in a Spanish-speaking congregation. My mother was a missionary to Colombia, learned the language, and then were church planters in, like I said, in Illinois. And out of that church, some 35 churches were birthed around the Midwest region. So I grew up in this bilingual culture, always assuming that we were all the same, we were all alike, we're all one in Christ Jesus, hallelujah and amen. And then our youth group, there were some young people that could get driver's license, and there was others that could not. There were some that when legal issues would arise, had different needs of different attorneys than other families in our churches. But when I started to become very aware of what this thing called immigration was, or citizenship, or the lack thereof, as my life continued, I followed in my father's footsteps and ended up in Virginia as a church planter. And that church ended up being, of the 250 some people we baptized in our first few years there, 67% of our church was undocumented immigrant. They were mainly from Central America, and our benediction was different than your benediction. Your benediction, you end and you said, the Lord bless you, and the Lord keep you, the Lord make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. Ours was, the Lord bless you, and the Lord keep you from the police this week. The Lord protect you from speaking Spanish to the wrong people. May the Lord just give, it was a different benediction. The testimony service, for any of you that grew up in a Baptist church that has testimony service, or for any hidden Pentecostals in the room that had testimony service, our testimony service was different than others. I vividly recall someone testifying in our church about being pulled over by the police in the utter terror that they had, that the police were going to come and they were going to have to say that they didn't have a driver's license, and that they had children at home, and they were praying and interceding, saying, God, send your angels to protect me. It's different than just getting upset that you got a speeding ticket on your way to work. So we're very aware of the issue, and there was one particular day that stood out to me. Church, we'd had a wonderful Sunday service. God had moved. People had given their lives to the Lord. And then that Monday morning at about 6:30 in the morning, my lead usher calls me and he says, Pastor, I need your help right now. We've been pulled over by the police. We're by exit 278 off of 64 going westbound, and I need your help. They're here, immigration is here, and he said, and brother so-and-so is here, and brother so-and-so is like half of my usher crew, all worked at the same company. So I threw on clothes, I raced out there, and I saw these are God-fearing, God-loving immigrants into our country. They are they're in handcuffs, and they're being escorted into an immigration van or an ICE van. And I ran over to help. Well, don't ever rush the police. Let that be a life lesson today. But I came running and I rushed, and an officer, a state trooper, stopped me and he said, "Who do you think you are?" I said, "Sir, it's okay. I'm their pastor." He said, "Wrong. You were their pastor." He said, "You'll never have to worry about them today." Now, ladies and gentlemen of this Christian jury, I know we're supposed to have love and grace and peace and the fruit of the Spirit, but right then and there, I didn't feel a lot of fruit of the Spirit. I felt a lot of anger, and I was very upset at what had just happened, and I determined I'm going to prove that officer wrong. And that is the day that I went beyond just preaching and praying to becoming active in this thing called immigration reform. I studied as much as I could. I made friends with attorneys, with immigration attorneys, and with different advocates within my community. And not that this is the end all of my speech, but all of those men that were picked up, I got them back in my church. And, we stood up to the system, if you will. Now, I'm not condoning saying that it's okay to do something the wrong way, but it was that moment of, it was a challenge that was brought before me, if you will. And so trying to understand how do I balance rule of law with reality from a biblical perspective. I'm not a politician, but I understand that I need to speak into these issues because these are the issues that matter to the people that I'm called to pastor. In all of that transition, I met a man named Samuel Rodriguez, the Reverend Samuel Rodriguez. I met him giving a speech in Washington, and he's this bold leader, if you will, praying in the name of Jesus, yet speaking about relevant issues. And he said things like, silent is not an option. He said, you are what you tolerate. And he boldly proclaimed over this group, this is the first meeting that I went to, he said, God has called us not to be followers of the agenda of the donkey or of the elephant, but of the agenda of the Lamb. And that's the first time I ever said amen at a political rally. And so that man ended up being my boss, my mentor, my friend, and has heavily influenced my perspective on politics as it relates to faith. It's how I entered into that, trying to help our people, to understand that the people that have come have not come because they simply want to break the law, simply because they saw a river and they decided, I'm gonna jump, I'm gonna run, let's go to the Genesis. What are they running from? Why are they coming? American history is taught throughout the Western Hemisphere, and it is taught that the United States is the land of the free, the home of the brave. It's taught that in the United States, there's freedom of religion. In the United States, there's freedom of speech. In the United States, there's freedom of enterprise. And they hear of this beautiful American dream, and it causes them to be dreamers as well. They hear of a land that for 400 years was founded by immigrants that have come from all over the world, and they came and they hear about our monuments that welcome the tired and the weary. They hear of a land that was built, that our railroads were built by immigrants, our cities were built by immigrants, and they dream that same dream, not because they want to invade and take over, but because they want to be partakers of the same American dream. And so they come to the border and they see two signs. They see one that says, do not enter, but then there's a bigger one that has Las Vegas lights and arrows, and it says, help wanted, inquire within. And so if you really want to know who's at fault for the issues that we have, as much as it's easy to blame the immigrant, from my perspective, it's really the fault lies at the business owner that was willing to hire these immigrants time and time and time and time again. And then we have this problem that has brewed for now you could say longer than 3 decades, but I'm gonna adjust my time frame to the time of Reagan till now. 3 decades 3 decades since Reagan's amnesty, 3 decades that this has been brewing, and Republicans have been in power and Democrats have been in power, and no one brings a solution to the table. Let me backtrack. They bring solutions, but no one has the political courage to vote on it and bring it to the president's desk to either sign or veto. I believe, it's my conviction, that we are misguided at times in what we focus on from the media. The media will always feed us the sound bites from the White House. But may I remind you, and I'm taking it a little bit out of context, and I cannot believe I'm going to take the Bible out of context, at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, of all the places I could do that. But remember that the book of Psalms says, I lift mine eyes to the hill from whence cometh my help. While we are arguing and squabbling over what takes place in the White House, may I remind us that it is those that work on Capitol Hill that are the only ones that can bring a realistic solution to this issue. Yet they're given a pass time and time again. You say, well, how do you know you get them a pass? Because they're reelected time and time and time again, some of them serving now over 2 decades. Oh, could you imagine going 20 days and not doing your job? Now imagine going 20 years and not doing something to bring this to a close. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not had a major piece of legislation on a president's desk to either sign into law or veto, unless I'm wrong, since the days of Ronald Reagan. It's easy, and again, we look to our president, whomever it may be, to whatever administration it might be. We look to them for leadership, but we have given Congress a pass time and time again. And until they put something on the president's desk to sign or veto, the onus is on Congress. We, as American citizens, must demand action. It's gone beyond just going and meeting and saying, well, you know, we'd like you to consider immigration reform. We'd like you to. We must demand action. It has reached a boiling point where we can't wait another 4 years. We can't wait. It is wrong to make of these people who are our brothers and sisters in Christ. It is wrong to allow them to be political pawns in a system, and where Democrats don't want there to be an immigration win under Republicans, and Republicans don't want there to be an immigration win under a Democratic administration. It's wrong on both sides of the aisle for them to play politics with human lives. It's wrong to say that you're pro-life and only care about babies in the womb if you are truly pro-life, you should care about life from the womb to the tomb. That means education reform, criminal justice reform, quality of life. Yes, and it does include the strangers. There's 2 arguments that I from the faith side and the political side. When it comes to the faith side, if these zealots, if these fanatics, and forgive me for saying it that way, a little of my Pentecost is coming out right now, but if these zealots were to be successful in deporting over 14 million people, do you realize what that would mean for the Christian church in America? You would virtually close almost every immigrant church in the United States of America. Now, from a spiritual perspective, tell me that the enemy is not behind that. Tell me that the enemy doesn't have his hand somewhat in this when he has the opportunity to close down the fastest growing segment of all flavors of Christianity, whether you're Baptist, Presbyterian, any stream of Pentecost, whatever you might come from. The fastest growing segment of Christianity is the immigrant community, specifically the Latino community. There's nothing that hell would like more than to shut down the growth of the church. But it is written in the Gospel of Matthew that the gates of hell will not, shall not, and cannot prevail against the church. So there are spiritual implications to this. There are spiritual implications. I lived not too far from the First Landing in Virginia, where settlers came and they planted a cross. They fasted for 3 days before ever touching land, and they planted a cross, and they said, we dedicate this land to the evangelization of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. There's a covenant between God and this land, and that's why God has used our people, used the people of this land to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to the ends of the earth. So there are spiritual implications, and then, of course, there are the political implications. The political implications being that both sides, Democrats and Republicans, are at fault for playing with our people. They have used them for political gain, yet neither side has brought this issue to a close. President Obama, who I respect, a man that I admired, had a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate, just as President Trump has a Republican House and a Republican Senate now. So just before, I'm going to bring it full circle. In his first term, President Obama had a complete Democratic government, if you will, and they did not touch immigration reform when he promised he would do it. Amongst Latinos, President Obama was known as the deporter-in-chief because more people were deported under President Obama's administration than any president before him. That's the reality of what our people thought. Yet there was open conversations. In his second term, I don't fault President Obama as much as I do, and I hope it's okay for me to be this open. I mean, we came. You know I'm on the Trump Faith Advisory Board, so you definitely want to hear what I have to say. In his second term, it wasn't President Obama, in my opinion, that was at fault as much as it was the Speaker of the House, who refused to call for a vote on immigration when we had at least 4 pieces of legislation that would have passed easily through the House. 4 different pieces of administration, and the Speaker of the House at that time, John Boehner, would not call for a vote because I believe, it's just my opinion, that Republicans did not want there to be an immigration win under President Obama. Now, fast forward to this current administration. When the campaign was going on, I was on the Rubio train. I'm a fan of Marco Rubio. I would have been very happy if Marco Rubio would have won the presidency of the United States. It would have made that op-ed that I wrote look really prophetic and really good had he won the presidency of the United States. But when it all came down to a close and there was 2 candidates left, and the Republican candidate reached out and invited me to be a part of his faith advisory board, I went to prayer. I needed to decide, what do I do? I had been critical of things that he had said within his campaign. And my heart's conviction comes from the biblical story of Jesus and Zacchaeus. You have a man that is hated in his community. You have a man of ill rapport, if you will. But Jesus calls him down, and Jesus not only calls him down, but goes to his house and has a conversation with Zacchaeus. And the town is in an uproar. How dare you? What gives you the right? How dare you eat at Zacchaeus' house? But inside of Zacchaeus' house, a conversation leads to a conversion. Now, I'm not Jesus, and I'm not saying that the man I'm referencing is Zacchaeus, but the application applies. It was the conviction that came to my heart that I can't influence someone that I'm unwilling to have a conversation with. I can't speak to someone that I'm not willing to engage, and I live under this principle that if I'm invited to share my worldview, if I'm invited to share my faith, then I'm going to do so. It's what makes humanity what it is. The greatest thing that we ever invented was language, that we're able to communicate one with the other. And so I did go to the table, and I did speak on behalf of our people. My mentor, my boss, the man that I admire, Samuel Rodriguez, I heard him sit next to the president and say, "Mr. President, if you're going to build a wall, build your wall, but build a bridge. Don't just build a wall, but build a bridge." And we sat at the table, and now I'd love to say, and ta-da, we've solved all the work. No, we're not there just yet. But we're at the table believing that as a witness, as a Christian, we can shine our light in dark places. And we believe that when it's all said and done, light always trumps, no pun intended, darkness. We believe the light always will win. And so that's where, that's been our heart's conviction. That's why we've served the way we've served. That's why and I do believe that we are closer than we have been in times past to seeing immigration reform get done. But it's going to take we the people holding our elected representatives accountable to remind them that they are our surrogates, that they speak on our behalf, not their behalf. We did not elect them for them to go and promote what they feel is right. We elected them to represent what we feel is right. And I close with this. When I go to Capitol Hill, and I go about once or twice a month, when I meet with senators and congressmen, they've opened their books, and I'm sure Noel has had similar experiences where they show us the tallies of the number of calls that they get on any given subject. Calls, emails, and letter writing still works. And they'll show you how many calls and letters and emails they've gotten on the economy. and how much they get on criminal justice reform. They'll show you. And when you get to immigration, as hot of a topic as this is, the number at times has always been slightly lower than other issues. And I don't know why exactly that is. No one knows exactly why it is. But I do know that, and again, it's my conviction, and one of the reasons why I'm here today, to implore you, by the mercies of God, if you will, since we're in a seminary, to encourage you as citizens and if you're passionate about this, please don't be silent. As my mentor says, silence is not an option. Speak out, speak loud, keep the pressure on, and I hope that soon and soon we will see immigration reform finally done in this country. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Todos están despiertos? Everybody awake? A little bit? Okay, thank you all for great presentations. I think everyone had a point that could be used for me to jump from and kind of take it from there. But again, my name is Noel, or like my grandma called me, Noel Castellanos, and I'm Mexican-American, born on the border of Mexico and Texas, but for some reason I was born 3 miles inside the border, okay? And by nature of that very little piece of real estate, my whole life is different. Many people have immigrated from all over the world to come here. We are a nation of immigrants, but I was just born, my great-grandparents came from northern Mexico to the United States. Some people question whether or not the border crossed them versus them crossing the border, okay? But they brought my grandparents when they were just little kids, and they were like some of the original dreamers, right? They were just kind of brought along for the ride. They grew up in Texas, but interesting, like in many immigrant communities, their first language was Spanish. Almost all business and conducting of life, church, everything was done in Spanish. My parents were born in this little town, same place, Weslaco, which is named after a gas and oil company. And then in 1959, I was born there in that little town. And my oldest memories are as a small child, my grandfather taking me by the hand and walking me across the border to buy frijoles, arroz, ajo, all these different spices and beans and rice, because the food was better in Mexico than it was in Texas for some reason, right? That's everything was like, and there was no checking of passports, IDs. You just walk freely back and forth. And I remember my grandfather, and he was a very tall Mexican, about 5'10", and he took me by the hand, and we would walk, and he'd say, "Mijo, ten cuidado, porque el bolillo te va a abusar." Okay? Translated, it's son, as you grow up, be careful, because the bolillo is a little white piece of bread, okay? Slang for the white person. They're going to abuse you. They're going to take advantage of you. Now, here's his experience, and he's telling his very small grandson this, kind of preparing me for life in this country. I'm a U.S. citizen, right? He had become naturalized. He got his green card, much easier back then. But the experience that I had was one of being in a country where the dominant culture was not Mexican. It was Anglo, white, and we knew we were minorities. We knew we had to kind of blend in. And many of you have heard much about the civil rights movement, where there's signs that say no blacks allowed in restaurants or whatever. Those same signs were there for Mexicans, okay? And so I grew up with that psyche, with that understanding. And I'll never forget my first day in kindergarten, walking into school, and I went to a Catholic school. And the nun said to me, as she was taking roll the very first day, she looked at me and says, "Noel Castellanos." And I didn't know who she was talking to. And she said it again, and I realized she was actually talking to me. I walked into that classroom, my name was Noel Castellanos. When I left that day, my name was changed, and I went home to tell my parents they changed my name, right? So, and I was Noel Castellanos till I graduated from high school. Okay, that's a long time. When I went to college, at just about the same time I'd become a Christian, I said, well, if it worked for Peter and Paul, you know, I'm going to say from now on, I'm not going to be Noel Castellanos. I'm going to be Noel Castellanos, or many people call me Noel because they can't say Noel like my grandmother. And so one of the things that I reflect on a lot as I think about the whole issue of immigration is that for me, I often ask myself, why was I born on this side, right? If I just had been born a little bit south, my life would be totally different, and I would not have, and I got to say that I don't believe I merit anything more blessing, more love from God, and yet that reality is what millions and millions of people who are looking from the outside into our nation trying to get in have to experience. So I see that immigrant reality very close because my family lived it. We went to Texas, and my dad got a good job, and now we were part of the working class, right? And I became a Christian. I went to a Christian college in the Hispanic Mecca of Spokane, Washington. I mean, there's a lot of Latinos there now because there's large agriculture, apples and others in the eastern side of the state. But at my little school, Christian College, there was only two of us, two Mexican Americans. And one of the young ladies that was Mexican that I got to know, she would tell everybody she wasn't Mexican. And my job was to say, Mija, it's okay. You know, you don't have to deny you're Mexican. It's not a bad thing, okay? But I graduated from college, and now as my faith was growing, I moved into the Mission District of San Francisco, okay? All my life I've been really immersed in the Mexican community, but now I was living in the Central American, Salvadorian, Honduran, Guatemalan community, and many immigrants were coming. Actually, many of them were refugees. And they were coming to the United States, landing in San Francisco because they were fleeing political war. Okay, there's a war going on in Central America. The United States was very involved, sometimes, as we came to find out later, covertly, where the U.S. Public did not know because Congress had not authorized war involvement in Central America. But these folks were leaving, they were coming. So they were not just coming because they were looking for a better life, but they were escaping a reality that in many ways we helped to create in Latin America. That was the first time I'd ever experienced another Latino culture that was in this country seeking asylum, refuge, and so I began to learn more about that reality. And then I ended up moving to the east side of San Jose, where Cesar Chavez, before he became the iconic leader of the Farm Worker Union, along with Dolores Huerta, he lived in a neighborhood called Sal Si Puedes. Anybody know what that means? Get out if you can. So I brought my new bride into that neighborhood. Her family was really thrilled with me. And we lived there, and second, third generation Mexican Americans, many of them whose families were farm workers, okay? And I realized that while many of these individuals were here legally, the working conditions of the poor, the people that put food on our tables, was deplorable. And Cesar Chavez began to fight for the rights, organizing for the first time along with Filipinos, right? So it was a multicultural, male-female-led movement that led to the first gains in civil rights for farm workers. And, I often think about the irony that the very people we're trying to keep out of our country or not allow to be able to find a way to work here legally, as was mentioned, because of the great need, are the folks that give us the benefit of giving us very cheap vegetables and fruits to eat every single morning. And really, for the American public, we really don't care, I don't think, too often how that food gets to our tables. We just want to know that it's cheap. And yet, many, many men and women and families are in our country, by some estimates, between 50 and 70% of all the farm worker, farm labor that is utilized to be able to do that for us are here undocumented, okay? And everybody knows it. And yet we find a way to maintain a system that in effect creates a permanent underclass of people who have no rights, no ability to protest if there's any kind of problem. And so all of that I began to learn about in San Jose. And then I moved to the west side of Chicago about 30 years ago, live in a neighborhood called Little Village, or La Villita, 100,000 Mexican descent residents. And what I realized there as I began, like Tony, to be a pastor in this Mexican neighborhood, and what I realized is how disconnected I was from the real firsthand knowledge of what was going on, because I was legal, okay? Because I had my citizenship. And so what happened is we were starting all these great programs for families, education programs, healthcare programs. Let's help you buy a house and start a business and help your kid to go to college. And then one after another, I'd hear a parent come and say, Pastor, yo no puedo conseguir otro trabajo mejor porque no tengo papeles. I can't get a better job. I'm stuck in this job. I've been here for 12 years and I'm still making $10 an hour or less. And it's because I don't have my documentation. And then another young lady, Pastor, yo quiero estudiar en la universidad, pero no puedo porque no califico para las becas que ofrecen. Yo no tengo mis papeles. Soy soñadora. I'm a dreamer. I don't qualify for all of these scholarships that are available because my parents brought me here when I was a baby. So I began to hear story after story, and so here's what I said, okay? And this is part of the idea, I think, the myths that exist out there. I said, well, let's go to a lawyer and we'll fix your immigration system. I'll do that for you. I was the great brown hope at that moment. I'm going to come to the rescue and help you. So I take them to an immigration agency, World Relief, and I say, here's my friends, my parishioners, would you help them get their status fixed? And they said, there's no way to do it. They don't qualify. There's not enough visas for folks that have just come into a country, ironically, they say, with no skill. But the people that pick the fruits and vegetables, they have great skill, and very few Americans either could or want to do that work, but they call them low-skilled workers. And so all of a sudden, I am faced with the reality of knowing that there is very little way, or virtually no way, to legally allow people to come in, even though what Tony said, the attraction and the draw of jobs. And to put into context, the reality is that I just read recently that today in our world, 7 billion people, 730 million people they want to move to another country, to another reality. They want to migrate for a better life of some kind. Almost 1 billion people. All throughout history, people have migrated because of war, because of famine, because of politics, because of persecution, you name it. That's how our nation came to be a nation of immigrants. And what happened is, all of a sudden, I began to realize that it was not just enough to say, these are the people at fault, the ones that come and are drawn here. I remember George Bush W. say, if I was a parent and my kids were in the situation that they're in another country, you bet I would bring them at whatever cost necessary. And I think many of us would say the same thing. So finally, here's the last, maybe one more story, then I'll make a last statement as a kind of rooting my own Christian perspective on this. The other day I was coming home on a trip, and I was on a plane, and the row behind me, there was 3 children, small children, and a mother, and that plane, that particular flight, I had been upgraded to first class, okay? I fly a lot of miles, and so every now and then that happens, and so I'm sitting in the last row of first class, and I'm feeling, all like, oh, I'm so grateful I get to sleep and all this, and, like I'm persecuted because I have to fly in coach, something like that. But then I look behind me, and these 3 kids are there, and this little boy who's about 8 years old, we're making eye contact, right? And he's such a cute little guy, and I could tell he was from Central America, right? And so I began to kind of, just giggle back with him, and when my food came, he was looking at me. They brought me a little tray, and so I said, can I give your son this cookie to the mom? I gave her the cookie, and then we walked out of the deal after the flight, and I said, where did you come from? And are you home in Chicago? No, we still got to go to Minneapolis. What's your story? Tell me your story. They had been detained at the Mexico border in Texas. Okay, they're here from Guatemala. Because of all of the uproar on the separation policy, they got to stay together in a facility for 2 weeks. Once they got to have a hearing with somebody there, it was determined that they have family in Minneapolis, so they sent them to Minneapolis. They gave them a court date. This was Friday. On Monday, they had to go to court in Minneapolis, accompanied by their family, and that judge was going to decide whether or not they qualified for asylum. Okay? Why did you come here? Was it because of violence? Was it because of some other kind of persecution? Was there spousal abuse? What's going on? And I was so struck by them just telling the story, and these little kids, so resilient. You could see that, can you imagine spending 2 weeks at the border in a facility where they're probably sleeping on the floor like you've seen on TV, and yet they still had this twinkle in their eye. But I said, oh my gosh, this family, what is coming for them? If Jesus were to be in that situation where he saw this, would he welcome them? Would he come alongside them? Would he start the conversation by talking about Romans 13 and lawfulness, okay? Or would he, with compassion, say, what's going on? I said, hey, come with me. You still got an hour before your flight. I took him into the United Club, and I said, here's your house for the next hour and a half. And these kids started, first thing they run to is to get some coffee, right? The 2-year-old, the 4-year-old, and the 7-year-old little boy, they're over there drinking coffee. And I just prayed for them. I talked to the mom, made sure she knew where she had to go. And I'm thinking, these are the people we're afraid of, okay? When God comes into the world as a human being and he incarnates himself into the world, the Bible says that he moves into the neighborhood. That's what the Eugene Peterson version says. What neighborhood does he move into? He moves into an obscure, unimportant little village called Nazareth. And it says that he grew up in that little town of maybe 50 to 100 people. Nobody should have paid any attention to him. And he lives his life among a group of marginalized individuals, far away from power, far away from any kind of significance, religious or political, in fact, under political oppression and domination. And when the Bible says that he was a carpenter, what many scholars believe is that what that actually means is that he was a day laborer. Jesus would wake up every day and he'd go out and say, can I get a job over here working for the Roman government to build some of their buildings. Some of the religious leaders are building religious or vacation homes on the Sea of Galilee. Can I go work there? So think about the men and women, mostly men, at the Home Depot that you pass by in the morning at 5 o'clock waiting for a job, and you say, the God of the universe becomes a man like that, a day laborer, and then lays down his life for the salvation of the entire world. Why? So that we might be his arms and feet in this world, loving the marginalized, loving the stranger, and those that nobody else would welcome, with the kind of love and a kind of compassion that can only come from heaven. Amen.
Each of the speakers will have 5 minutes, and then we'll have our Q&A time, and I will have more to say at that point. So let's go ahead and let's do this in reverse order. Well, no, let's not. Since we all had a chance, we'll start again. Ben, let's start with you, and we'll just go down the aisle in order. And if you have any comments or interactions you'd like to say, go ahead.
Okay. Whew. I appreciate everyone's presentations today. It's excellent. I guess to emphasize the impact of immigrants in the country, some 2 or 3 more points. That more than half of the billion-dollar companies in the U.S. are founded by immigrants. Each of these, on average, creates 760 new jobs. 25% of all new businesses in the U.S. are started by immigrants. Over 50% of all PhDs are earned by immigrants or foreign students in the United States. 76% of new patents on inventions involve immigrants from top patent-producing universities. 100% of U.S. Nobel Prize winners were born outside the U.S. 2 years ago. The impact of immigrants in this country are never highlighted and recognized. The challenge I had in preparing this information was what creates a tipping point. And I think what I appreciate is the value of religion as, I would say, a universal value in the United States. And I think the other piece of that, as a huge partner, could be business. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. gathers this information and is very cognizant of the fact of the role immigrants play in entry-level workers or high-end, high-tech workers. I think it's another major partner just to maintain the economy of this country, and you wrap around that the impact of baby boomers retiring. I mean, we're just going into a train wreck if we stay on the path we're on, is the way I'm looking at it. And what are we leaving our kids and our grandkids, I think, is going to be the compelling argument as we look to the future.
How do you think we get U.S. companies on board with, really pushing for this reform? I mean, if the chamber's on it, kind of on a local and a national level, how do you ensure that businesses are putting this at the front of their agenda is the same that they will with, wanting corporate tax breaks? I mean, will it take for them to get there?
I thought about that, and I'm not sure, but I think at the end of the day, this is quantifiable. I mean, when you look at that many baby boomers on a daily basis retiring, it just seems, I don't know how you put this together. It almost seems like it's a multi-pronged. How many arrows do you need in the quiver to create the tipping point that will create sustainable change here?
Right.
And I would hugely go to the religious activity in the United States. I think Republicans, Democrats, there is a family value in this United States, I think, that needs to be lifted up. I think the concept of preserving the economy and making us internationally competitive. China is geared to eat our lunch in everything. When you read about 5G coming into reality next year and growing over the next 10 years, China is framed to lead the world in this, and the United States does not want to get behind. And unless you have this family of high-tech workforce people in the United States working on this, we will become dependent under China. I mean, it's a done deal if we do not begin to grow our intelligence. So, I mean, to answer the question, I think it's going to be more than one thing, and it is getting data out. People do not understand this. You read in the paper, it's all about crime, it's all about takers, it's not about givers. You know, all the negative things that you just keep hearing and hearing and hearing. So I think, I don't know how you move to it, but a data-driven conversation, I mean, positively wrapping religion around this, family values around this. And I like the idea when you help somebody get elected, hold them accountable. It's almost grassroots organizing is one of the things that keep coming to my mind that have created sustainable change in this country.
Right.
And it's the faith-based, the PICU on the West Coast, IAF in Chicago. I mean, those church-based organizations have created sustainable change on critical issues in our country.
Yeah. I mean, what we see in our practice is just sort of a lack of flexibility in the system to evolve to what the modern economy is, and, you know, at the same time, you know, being more restrictive for legal immigration, and a failure kind of on an individual level to pass, I think as Tony was saying, you know, individual pieces of legislation that could pass, things like the DREAM Act, but Congress won't act, you know, on these individual bills. They have to jam everything together to do these comprehensive things, which you can understand. I mean, you don't want to solve, you know, problem A and leave, you know, B through Z, but at the same time, if there's consensus on one issue, you know, there's no forward movement there. So, I mean, I don't know how you sort of educate the American public about how difficult legal immigration actually is, you know, and sort of the detriment, like you were saying, to the American family. You know, when you talk about you know, family separation on multiple levels, you look at things like, you know, the travel ban, for instance. You know, we have clients who are Yemeni, who have American children who are stuck overseas with their mother, who, but for this, would be a permanent resident of the United States. You know, there's not a lot of, or these really long backlogs, there's not a lot of equity or common sense, you know, in the current approach. But I don't know how you get past sort of the divisiveness or the politics of it, you know, to get to that consensus, you know, and make it about the individual, you know, about the American company and about the family.
Yeah. I think what a number of the participants were here are already engaged in the issue, and I think one of the frustrations is, like, what can we do right now that can make a difference? And I think, like, when I had my awakening, realizing that that our system is broken, I realized I too had to go to Washington. I had to go speak to my senators and congressional leaders and all. So because it's a federal problem, right? It's a federal law that needs to be, and policy that needs to be revamped. But I know that while we're in that state of not having a law, then there's a lot we have to do state by state, county by county. You know, can people get a driver's license? Dreamers, can they pay in-state tuition to get an education? You know, is there going to be a cooperation between the police and ICE to enforce immigration law? You know, are we going to profile people? Just if you see a person who's Hispanic or brown looking or looks like, oh, they could be legal. Let's stop them and see if we can, you know, initiate some kind of arrest, deportation, or detaining that would lead to deportation. So I think there's so many ways to get engaged once you realize that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. You think about the Underground Railroad, right? That was going on during the slavery, where the church said, hey, yeah, there's a law on the books, slavery's legal, but it's immoral. And we're going to have to engage, and we're going to be subversive in helping to move people through and help them escape the South and to move into a free situation. There's things like the sanctuary movement that's going on all over the country, where churches activate not violently, but they say we're going to come alongside immigrant families and be there for them and pray for them and stand and protect them until there is a change in some of the unjust laws that are on the books right now that have been spoken about so clearly by our other panelists here. But I think ultimately it's like if you live close to immigrants, you're going to know what's going on, right? You're going to find out if you have a relationship. So I think that's one of the big struggles is many of us are just not connected to anybody who's going through this struggle, and so it's just a political issue or a controversial issue instead of a person that kind of puts flesh to the reality of that situation.
If by chance there is someone that struggles with with this thought of, yeah, Tony, I hear you, but they're here illegally. They should have come why don't you tell them to come the right way? First off, as a father of 3 children, if my children were hungry, if my children were in danger of sex trafficking or being killed by terrorists or gangs or whatever it might be, I would do anything I have to do to protect my children, to provide for my children, and to feed my children. That, in that moment, trumps anything else to me. These families that have come, they don't come because they want to break the law. They come because they're seeking refuge in the one place in the world that they've always been told they can come and seek refuge. I'm not saying it's right to come the wrong way, but if you say to me, Tony, have them come the right way, what is the right way? Is the right way to wait 20 years? Is the right way to throw their money into a visa lottery that absolutely still exists in some countries? Is that the right way? Or is the right way for us who have a voice to be a voice for the voiceless and to demand change from our elected representatives, to demand that they fix this broken immigration system? That if our economy calls, and I'm just making up numbers, but if our economy calls for 500,000 foreign workers, then why would we cap it at 200,000, if you will? Why don't we allow the market to help us dictate the amount of foreign workers that we need? I visited along the El Paso border. That's Ciudad Juarez there, right? I visited there. There's a wall, by the way. It's not pretty, but it's there. There's a wall. It's a big wall. The wall isn't the problem, respectfully. We don't have a wall problem. We have a door problem. It's the entry and exit system that's broken. Fix that. And you have virtually solved the immigration problem. If there was, and again, I'm not trying to make this so elementary. This is a very complex issue, but just think of it. If there was a right way and it worked, no one would have to come the wrong way. But there is no right way, except these people are fleeing, and this is their only hope, and that's why they continue to come.
Okay, well, thank you. We've got a lot of time to get some good questions. Now, you can go ahead and start making your way up, and we've got 2 mics that are over here. So you'll have a lot of questions. There are, in some business rules, business meetings, you have Robert's Rules of Order. In these meetings, you have Lloyd's Laws. I'm Lloyd, and I make the laws. And my laws are this: we have paid our speakers generously because we want to hear what they have to say. We would like your questions, but we don't need your dissertations. So please ask a question, keep it succinct, and we will do that. If your question starts turning into a dissertation, I'll probably encourage you to turn it into a question, or we might have to just move on. So please be succinct, and let's get going. I will get out of the way. We will start here with the ladies.
Thank y'all so much. It was beautiful and enlightening and all of it. My question is, in looking at the sanctuary movement, what are some practical ways that we can help to educate those in the church to start seeing this in a data-driven kind of conversation if they're resistant? If they are seeing, oh, come here the right way, all these kind of, like, how do we do that without being whoever?
What's the name of the film that we did a few years ago? Was it I'm a Stranger?
Yeah, there's there's a lot of resources out there. The Evangelical Immigration Table has put out a number of resources, but there's a book, Welcoming the Stranger, another book called Christians at the Border. I don't know if you even have some of those here, but there's, you can literally go to YouTube and just put in immigrant stories, and you'll get all kinds of different examples. I think right here in New Orleans you have some great resources. The economic factor, it's interesting because for our country politically that's so important. I think for the church it ought to be a lot easier, because the issue of loving somebody who is hurting or vulnerable, but I think churches, pastors need to speak on this. They need to talk about it. So these books might be helpful.
And I think it's, if you can, to encourage your church to have worship with an immigrant community, immigrant church, if you will. Because this is a political issue until you put a face to it. And then you humanize the issue. So if you can find a way to have fellowship with a Hispanic, and any community, any immigrant community church, I think it helps. I think it helps when they can meet somebody, and now this is no longer just what they heard on whatever media they listen to, but this is a real person that's sitting next to me worshiping the same Jesus that I worship.
I'll start then. I don't know, did anybody see the editorial in yesterday's paper? I was totally impressed, and her title she put on it was Draw from the Left and the Right. And she called it Sensible Immigration Policy. And she said there's 3 goals. be humane, enforce the laws, and meet America's need for labor. It seems like a lot of people say we got to have a law, but we need to update it. And the challenge for me is, how do we create the rules so people know the right way to get into the country, which right now doesn't seem to really exist with this quota system. So, I mean, I lean back towards something like that. I really don't personally have the answer for this, but it seems to me we create a set of laws so people understand if you're eligible to come here and what are those criteria, and it should be an inclusive process, but very humane. You would never separate families from their children. It would be common sense approach to what does the United States reflect. And I would go back to our values. I've always thought of the Statue of Liberty with that idea, bring me your poor, your hungry. And it just seems like that doesn't exist anymore. But the complicated part of this seems to be what is the correct law that's humane, serves the interests of immigrants that want to come here, and realistically serves the United States. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think the entire world can come to the United States, but I liked her three principles of the humaneness, clarify the law, and create that type of an environment for people that allow them to get work and to meet worker needs in the United States. Did you have any more to add to that one at all, Tony? I mean, it's...
Regarding the border?
Yeah.
Well,
you were talking a little bit about that to me.
Well, just, and then I'll answer the question about the womb to the tomb. Just, I would say that I am in favor, and I think anyone that advocates on behalf of immigration reform knows we have to secure the border. You have to protect the border. We need to take care of this. This is, if there's one thing that, or a criticism one could say of the Reagan amnesty was that it helped those that were here, but we never did truly address the border, hence why 30 years later, we're still dealing with this topic, so dealing with this issue. So there has to be border security. So I would say that I hope we were clear on that. In terms of the question that you asked me about being pro-life from the womb to the tomb, I don't know what Bernie Sanders says about it. I don't know what left-leaning people say about it. I know what I mean by it when I say it. When I say to be pro-life is to value life from the womb to the tomb, it's recognizing the imago Dei, the image of Christ in every human being, and valuing and respecting that. You asked something about single-parent or about health care. I don't know, but I'm saying that I respect I respect the imago Dei in an immigrant. I respect the imago Dei in a human being enough that if I say I'm going to be pro-life, then I should care about I feel that we should care about these issues as well because they affect our humanity. They affect people that we worship with, go to school with, and even work with.
Can I just say that I think one of the temptations that we have is to, as Christians, to say the Republican Party is the Christian Party.
Right.
The Democratic Party is the Christian Party, you know, or demonize the other, okay? And we are called to pursue the kingdom of God, okay, which is about helping the poor, which is about valuing life. And you know, like with the Chamber of Commerce, it'd be very easy to say capitalism, you know, is perfect. There's no flaw in capitalism, okay? Now, you know, there are some folks that would advocate that with religious conviction, and I think that there is no system that is without flaw. And so that's why the church and Christians need to constantly be holding accountable whoever's in power, whatever party's there. Because I've seen great Christians in socialist countries, and I've seen great Christians in capitalist countries. And I think the other thing that is very interesting with religious freedom is, you know, persecution has often been present for the church. You know, where are you going to demand, you know, that it's always easy for us, or does our faith sometimes cost us, right? Loving somebody to the point of sacrifice. So I get leery where we baptize any one political party and say that's what's going to save us. I don't believe that, to me, that is really a very, very troubling kind of approach.
Can you just clarify which process you're talking about? I'm sorry, I missed that part of your. Becoming a naturalized citizen? Yes. Okay. So, I mean, first and foremost, you have to be a permanent resident. I mean, talking, obviously about acquiring citizenship, you have to be a permanent resident first for either 5 or 3 years. 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, 5 years if you are if you acquired your permanent residency through another manner. And so obviously you have to get to that permanent residence step first. Under our system, the family relationship is sort of the most highly rewarded on the family side. So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, the minor child under 21 of a U.S. citizen, or the parent of a U.S. citizen, generally speaking, you can immigrate to the United States outside of this quota system, but that's all dependent on the fact that you either are living abroad and have never been in the U.S. without permission, or that you enter the United States legally. So, the common scenario that we see is individuals who are married to U.S. citizens. A lot of times the undocumented individual is the primary breadwinner of the family, and the U.S. citizen is the primary caregiver in the family. So you have this situation where in order to get legal, the primary breadwinner has to leave the United States for a period of time. President Obama implemented a new kind of waiver system in order for somebody who is undocumented and has been here for over 6 months without permission to return to the United States. They have to apply for forgiveness or a waiver and show that their U.S. citizen spouse would suffer extreme hardship if they're not allowed to return, or if that spouse had to go abroad and live in their foreign spouse's home country. The system that President Obama implemented allowed the families to apply for that waiver while they were still in the United States. The system before that required the individual to wait abroad for a consular officer to make a decision on whether or not they had enough hardship. And so the system is definitely better, but it's still precarious. Right now what we're seeing is a lot of denials. You may have heard in the news that the administration is really focused on this quote-unquote public charge. So if they don't believe that they believe that the individual will go on public assistance in the United States, they are denying the visas, which means they deny the waiver, which means the individual has to wait longer. For people who have entered the United States multiple times illegally or have deportation orders and returned illegally, they are not eligible for any type of waiver. They have to sit outside of the United States for 10 years. So, this idea of just why can't you get legal sounds really nice, but in certain circumstances it is impossible. And so you're left with a situation of American families in the United States with no option for their loved one to get legal. And of course, all of the applications, are expensive, thousands of dollars to apply for these various benefits. Lawyers are expensive, and at the end of the day, sometimes there is no guarantee. No.
I have no problem with building the wall. I think we should build the wall. And I have no problem with border security at all. I think we should secure the border. I think we should secure it for our protection and our security, and also because it is the one issue that holds up all of the other dominoes in the effect of getting immigration reform done once and for all. So I want to make sure that I was clear on that. My personal opinion is it worth $30 billion? If you build the wall, does it finally fix immigration reform? My answer is no. I don't think it finally solves it, but I do think it does. I do think it's a piece of it. I think border security is a piece, but there's also a legislative solution that's still going to have to take place. Once you build the wall, you still have 14 million people inside of the wall that are here, and we have to come up with a solution to help them. Whatever that's going to be, we have to do something to bring people out of the shadows. In reference to the second scripture you brought up, I'm not familiar with that. I wouldn't want to even try to give a fake answer because I'm not familiar with it, right? So. Yeah, I'll have to read up on that, but again, my personal perspective, I'm not in favor of family separation and pulling children away from their parents. It's not something I'll at least do my due diligence and read up on what you did. So I appreciate you bringing that to me.
Thank you, Ryan.
I think as we've said, we can't accept everyone in the U.S. There has to be a system, but it has to be, there has to be a humanitarian element, which is the system that we have now or that we had, is accepting refugees, accepting people who have a credible fear of persecution if they return home. The system today doesn't accept everyone who comes from a war-torn country or country with terrible things that happen. I meet with people all the time and say, I'm from Venezuela, it's terrible that, all these terrible things are happening, can't you do something for me? No, I can't. The system doesn't work that way. And it will not evolve to that. We're so far from that. And I don't think we are. Our refugee numbers are down. The asylum standards have changed. A woman or a family a woman who's a victim of domestic violence can no longer seek asylum in the United States. So we are not the refuge for the world, and we will not go back to where we were. I don't believe. Not anytime soon.
I don't know if I'm the right one to answer that question. Okay.
So we do have a visa for what they call treaty traders or treaty investors, for people who want to come and set up their own company, who inject capital into the United States or engage in a substantial amount of international trade between the U.S. and their home country. Now, the caveat to that is that you have to be from a country, to have citizenship of a country that we have an express trade treaty with to grant this type of visa. So we do not have those trade treaties with, every country in the world. President Obama did announce an entrepreneur rule that has been dismantled. It never was fully implemented, but it would have allowed for people to create new businesses who had a certain amount of venture capital pledged, but that rule has been, basically scrapped. So it will never, come into play. And the only other way for investors to come here and create new jobs is through the, they call it the Investor Green Card or the EB-5 program. But they generally have to invest $1 million and employ 10 full-time U.S. workers.
That'll get you in $1 million.
I'm sorry?
I said $1 million will get you in.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. A merit system? I mean, possibly, depending on what they require. If you could demonstrate capital on hand, a business plan, possibly, past job creation, things like that. But there are very few options for people to come here and create their own company. Even, for most sponsored classifications, you have to demonstrate that there is an employer-employee relationship. So if you're your own boss, you can't hire and fire yourself. So that generally doesn't work. And then when you talk about the green card side, for most positions, you have to advertise the job and show that it is open to all U.S. workers. So same thing for like family businesses or self-employed businesses. Obviously, if you're, advertising for your own job, you want to hire yourself or your brother or daughter. So that doesn't really work either. We don't really have a good system for, outside of those few options that I mentioned for, for investment, for business creation.
Can I just say, in my neighborhood, 100,000 people in Chicago, we have 1,000 businesses owned by mostly Mexican immigrants. We pay the second contribution, highest contribution of sales tax in the whole city, second to the Magnificent Mile. 100,000 people, mostly Mexican immigrants. Many are undocumented. So in the face of incredible challenges, immigrants are making a great contribution, often with great disadvantage. So.
My question is this: do you think it is realistic to have an immigration system other than complete open borders where we don't have anyone coming in illegally? And if so, what would that look like?
One of the, if I may make a little religious joke here in the Baptist seminary, but one of the faults of us Pentecostals is sometimes we speak without notes and just under inspiration. I'm just a little joke there. But if I said that it would eliminate illegal immigration, people are always going to try to break the law. I mean, there will be someone that hates America that will try to break the law, if you will. But what I think we can do by fixing the system is that I think we can significantly decrease. Because if there is a right way to come, if I'm a God-fearing, I hate to use elementary terms like this, but if I'm just if I'm a good family if I'm just a good God-fearing family in Guatemala right now, and I want to come to the United States, I just want to come. This is where I fear something in my economy, and I want to come to the United States. I don't have a way to come right now. So what I'm saying is create a pathway so that good family, and we can't accept everyone that wants to come, but let's bring a system that at least doesn't make us wait 20 years. That's a little more in lines of what I was trying to say, and I apologize if I just said it would just completely do away, because I'm not naive enough to think that there's always going to be someone that still is going to try to come the other way.
And for our last question.
This is for, I guess, the first part of the question is for Mr. Johnson, and the rest is for the panel at large. So with the creation of more automation services arising, for example, self-driving cars, how much do you think this affects the need of menial or cheap labor for the future? And with that, if these jobs that were previously fulfilled by undocumented immigrants dry up because of automation, how does it affect the livelihood of these immigrants? And if the effects are negative, how do we as a Christian community ensure that their livelihood is protected? I know it's kind of a complicated future question, but I think it's something necessary we have to ask.
Was your example of a self-driving car, did I hear you right?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what people are saying, the economists say what we don't want to do is people prepare for jobs that we can't offer them a living wage. So what happens is those things are being outsourced to other countries, and their countries are able. It's a good job for folks in other countries. What we don't want to do with our employees is dumb them down. The goal is to help them get the skill set to go to what the next opportunity is. So if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if I can apply it to the driverless car, but the idea would be is we don't want to go back, we don't want to stay here, you want to keep moving to the next opportunity. So we would want to be creating the microchips for the phones, for the 5G phone. We would want to be creating the systems for the driverless cars. We want to be on the cutting edge of what the next iteration is of opportunity, and education plays a huge role in that. So that's on the high end. On the other end, and I didn't emphasize it a lot, but the documentation is there. There's all kinds of businesses in this United States where there's opportunity for entry-level employment. They use the term they're less desirable jobs, and many Americans will not even do them. And what they say is when many immigrants first come to the country, it's an opportunity for them that far exceeds what they left. And it's the beginning, and the first generation has the harder life. But they're saying when you get to the second and third generation, the focus is on education for the kids, and they're going up that skill set to enjoy the better jobs. It's an imperfect system. It's the ideal that I just described. But I think a lot of people aspire to that for your economy, if you're not going to the next edge and beyond, you're going to regress, and you don't catch up. Other countries are going to exceed and become the experts in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now, I'd mentioned that was our last question, but it looked like we had a member of the press here who was diligently recording everybody else's responses rather than standing in line. So, yes, you may ask your question.
Thank you. I am with the press, Big Easy Magazine. Hi. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. My first one is about, let's see. We have had some high-profile crimes, especially in Europe, carried out by immigrants. particularly from the Middle East, including rape, child grooming, and honor killings. Here, anytime an immigrant, especially an illegal one, kills somebody or commits a major crime, the media does make it national news. Shouldn't we be concerned about this? And is that a justification to completely close borders? Why or why not?
I think that's the press's fault myself, but it's one opinion. I mean, it's the classic situation where an act happens, and all of a sudden that becomes the international news. Versus if you put that in context of population, and I think I went into that a little bit on crime, on a percentage basis, it's so much more minuscule compared to what exists here. So did it happen? Yes. Is it terrible? Yes. But on a percentage basis, it's been, from my perspective, blown out of proportion, and that becomes the norm. That's what people remember. So I really do point the finger back at the press personally.
All right. Thanks.
They say you all have tough skin. It's true, huh?
I do.
Yeah, I got it.
You know, give me 1 second.
Most criminal aliens get deported, so
Yeah.
unless you've been convicted of a, petty offense, in most instances, even if you're a permanent resident, if you're convicted of murder, you may find yourself outside.
While you're looking for that,
I found it.
that's okay.
This one's for you, sir. You said something very interesting. If you close every immigrant church in America, if you deported 14 million illegal immigrants, you talked about how that seemed to be not just an attack on immigration, legal and illegal, but an attack on the Christian faith through those immigrants. Would you mind expounding upon that, please?
It's a spiritual argument. It's a spiritual argument. If there's 14 million undocumented immigrants, the largest growing segment of Christianity is amongst the immigrant community, namely the Latino community. If somehow 14 million people were rounded up and deported, you can make the argument that you virtually close the majority of Spanish-speaking congregations. That sends the averages of growth in the United States. The church would see an instant decline. I think it's I was making a spiritual argument of what that would mean to Christianity in the United States.
Thank you.
Excellent. And then we have one really small question, you said? All right, teeny tiny. Well, thank you. Let's give a round of applause and appreciation to our guests. Well, we presented and heard tonight a number of ideas, and perhaps this will be the spark that will start a continuing discussion that can lead to some kind of action and change.